It began the way many life-altering stories do, without drama or warning, hidden inside moments too small to fear. A forgotten line during conversation, keys misplaced more than once, a sentence that drifted away before it could finish. At first, these were brushed aside as stress, exhaustion, the natural clutter of a busy life. Mark laughed them off, Kelly smiled through them, and the family moved forward because that's what families do when the alternative feels unthinkable. But as days passed, the small lapses began stacking into something heavier. His appetite faded, meals became symbolic rather than nourishing, and evenings ended early with long, unnatural naps. The house felt quieter, not peaceful, but suspended, as if everyone was holding their breath without realizing it. When laughter leaves the room, there is a moment when concern replaces denial, when humor no longer cushions uncertainty. That moment arrived quietly, without announcement. Kelly noticed it in the way Mark stared at his plate, the way he seemed distant even when sitting close. The laughter that once filled their routines thinned out, replaced by cautious glances and half-spoken questions. Time began to feel distorted, stretching in some places and vanishing in others. The family sensed something was wrong long before any doctor confirmed it, because the body often whispers before it screams. Fear didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, settling into corners of the day and refusing to leave. The diagnosis that changed the air. The diagnosis did not come with theatrics or softened language. It arrived clinically, wrapped in medical terminology that landed heavier than emotion ever could. Cancer was the word that changed everything, sitting between them like something fragile and dangerous at the same time. Doctors spoke carefully, explaining progression, outlining options, emphasizing uncertainty. There were no guarantees, only probabilities. Kelly listened intently, absorbing every word, while Mark remained still, processing a future that had suddenly fractured. The room felt smaller after that conversation, as though the walls had leaned inward, and the life they knew had been quietly rerouted without their consent. Choosing calm in the face of fear, Mark responded with a steadiness that surprised even those closest to him. He said, "Okay," not because he understood what lay ahead, but because it was the only word that fit the moment. It wasn't resignation or bravery in the cinematic sense, but something quieter, more human. Kelly watched him carefully, searching for cracks, knowing how thin the line was between composure and collapse. The children reacted differently, each finding their own way to process the shock. Schedules were rearranged, priorities shifted, and without discussion, the family moved into action. Love became logistical. Support turned into structure. Fear was acknowledged, but it was not allowed to lead. Learning the language of hospitals. Hospital life has its own vocabulary, and Kelly learned it quickly. She memorized names, routines, shift changes, and numbers that suddenly carried enormous weight. The scent of antiseptic became familiar, as did the rhythmic hum of machines and the quiet professionalism of nurses who carried empathy without spectacle. Doctors spoke in measured tones, explaining treatments designed to slow progression, to buy time, to create space for hope. Kelly took notes, asked questions, and learned to live inside uncertainty without letting it overwhelm her. The hospital became a second home, one built not of comfort, but of resolve. Living under the public eye. While the family navigated private fear, the public watched from a distance that felt uncomfortably close. Cameras appeared. Headlines speculated. Images were circulated without context or permission. Kelly found herself existing in two worlds simultaneously, one where Mark slept under fluorescent lights, and another where his illness became content for discussion. Attempts to control the narrative felt fragile, statements offering gratitude and asking for privacy often doing little to slow the tide. The distance between truth and assumption grew wider, and the family learned that silence, while necessary, often invites noise. The night everything shifted. The crisis came swiftly, the way emergencies often do, collapsing hours into moments. A sudden fever, alarms breaking the steady hum of the ward, staff moving with urgent precision. Mark was transferred to intensive care and the family felt the ground drop beneath them. The ICU was a different world entirely, governed by glass walls, beeping monitors, and a relentless awareness of fragility. Doctors explained complications carefully, emphasizing infection and strain, assuring the family that nothing had been overlooked. Fear deepened, but clarity emerged alongside it. This was serious, and pretending otherwise was no longer an option. When strength finally gives way, there are limits to endurance, even for those who appear unbreakable. Kelly reached hers quietly, stepping into a hallway to take a call, her mind overloaded with information and responsibility. The collapse was not dramatic, but deeply human. A moment of dizziness, a loss of balance, and then the floor rising to meet her. Nurses responded immediately, offering reassurance without questions. It was not weakness, it was the natural consequence of holding too much for too long. For the first time, the weight she had been carrying became visible, even to herself. Waiting without answers. Recovery is rarely linear, and the days that followed were marked by watchful patience. Progress was measured in small victories, stable vitals, moments of recognition, lines on charts bending in the right direction. The family learned to celebrate quietly, guarding hope while refusing to let it run ahead of reality. Meals shared in waiting rooms tasted different, infused with gratitude simply for continuity. Humor returned cautiously, not as denial but as resistance. Life in fragments continued. Rebuilding strength. Inch by inch. When Mark was finally moved out of intensive care, it felt like crossing a threshold. The danger had not passed, but the immediate storm had softened. His strength returned slowly, unevenly, shaped by the demands of treatment. Kelly transformed his space, softening edges where she could, protecting his energy with gentle authority. The children adapted again, taking on roles that balanced practicality and care. Each of them contributed differently, but with the same intention, to make recovery possible without pressure. Reclaiming the narrative. As weeks passed, the public conversation shifted. Silence gave way to measured updates and speculation faded into respect. Kelly's return to work was not triumphant but intentional. She spoke honestly, not about prognosis but about fragility, about how easily routines collapse and how deeply relationships matter. The audience responded not with curiosity but with empathy. The story was no longer about illness, it was about endurance, a victory that didn't need applause. The breakthrough arrived without fanfare, improved scans, encouraging results, a future that no longer felt provisional. Mark's first walk down the hospital corridor was slow and unsteady, but it was his. Each step carried meaning beyond movement. Homecoming followed, carefully planned, mindful of new realities. The house felt different, but alive again. What remained was not the life they had before, but something reshaped by gratitude, patience, and perspective. A family changed, not broken. Living through uncertainty altered the family permanently, but not destructively. Priorities clarified. Time became intentional. The scaffolding of life proved fragile, but the bonds beneath it endured. What emerged was not a return to normal, but a deeper understanding of what mattered most. The story did not end with certainty or closure, but with resilience, quiet strength, and the knowledge that love, when tested, can expand rather than fracture.